Faulkner, who is, sorry about that, guys, who is the incoming principal at Doherty Valley High School. And as a member of the Doherty Valley community, I just want to say how thrilled we are and how lucky all of our students are to have you. So, Lauren, do you want to say a few words or?
No, I'm just really honored to be serving and supporting the Doherty Valley community as the incoming principal of the high school, and look forward to getting to know the community, students, staff. I've been a part of the community for 3.5 years, but look to continue doing that good work. And I'm really thrilled to be here and to share my knowledge with you all tonight.
And to be clear, although I said that Lauren is the incoming principal, prior to that, she's been an assistant principal at the high school. She's been a high school teacher. And I believe you were at the district for a little bit as well. So in terms of being around our students from every angle, Lauren is 110% the person that we want to be here with us tonight. So I am going to share my screen, and bear with me for a minute when this happens because I always mess it up. But we're gonna get there. See, I just messed it up, guys.
Hmm.
1 second. There we go. Okay, so advocacy tips for your student. What we're going to talk about tonight is, the who, when, and what. So many times when our child has a problem or an issue or even a concern, um, we wonder, who do we reach out to? So that's one of the first answers we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about when should you intervene, and then the last part of it is what should your email or what should your conversation look like? Because how we structure our communications really has an impact on our children's outcomes. So the first thing, who do I talk to? As you can see on the screen, it looks kind of complicated. And this is straight from the San Ramon Valley Unified School District website. Now, breaking it down, it's actually not that complicated. And I was wondering, Lauren, if you want to speak to this.
Absolutely. I would say that first and foremost, and again, it really depends on the level that your student is at, whether or not they're, lower elementary, upper elementary, middle school, or high school. Having worked in mostly secondary my career, both as administrator at middle school level and teacher at middle school level, and at high school as well, it really depends on when that level of communication is going to take place. At the secondary level, I always like to say, encourage your students to reach out first to their teacher and have that dialogue. And definitely in person is best, because you can have somebody pull out their backpack or pull out their folder or pull out their agenda or wherever the case may be. Oftentimes, especially at the middle school level, that backpack is a dark hole and a void, and you usually find something crumpled up at the bottom of it that can be turned in. So definitely in person is best, but I like to have that dialogue with the students first, especially as a teacher, just to show them that I'm not scary, and to have them practice that self-advocacy skills that they're going to need moving forward and as they matriculate through the school system. Now, if you're talking with, you know, lower elementary students or even upper elementary students, you're going to want to reach out to that teacher first and foremost, because they're going to have the most relevant information for you and are going to be able to share what they're seeing in class, because sometimes that doesn't always get translated home. So they can be the best person to ask, answer those questions.
And a lot of what Lauren says, this really does just depend on your child. I had a conversation earlier with her today where we talked about high school is where we really start to see students be independent of their parents. And Lauren, you made a comment about not letting go.
Yeah, so I taught high school biology. So I was my bread and butter were really my freshmen. I taught mostly freshmen. And I know there's this natural inclination, especially when they move off to high school, that okay, they're off into high school. You can kind of release the reins, so to speak, and kind of let them do their own thing. But I would always encourage my parents at back to school night, do not let go. Keep at least one hand on them, whether it's a shoulder or, an arm or whatever the case may be. Because really that transition from middle school to high school is pretty much a year-long transition. It starts the middle of their 8th grade year and probably doesn't wrap up until about now. I want to say February of their freshman year. So the inclination, especially their first semester freshman year, is to kind of let them go and see how they do. I'm going to really encourage you guys not to, and just say that, if they're going to reach out to a teacher with questions or in need of support or whatever the case may be, have them write the email, but put you on it so that you're aware and you're there to kind of back them up should they need any further support, or the teacher knows that they can dialogue with you as well. And maybe there needs to be an adult conversation had aside from the student. So having you there is definitely going to, one, you can teach them the skills to advocate for themselves as well and better support that conversation as they transition into high school.
Absolutely. I'm going to click on to, at the bottom of my screen, you can see www.srvusd.net. So I'm going to click, well, that didn't work. I'm sorry. But if you go to srvusd.net, in the right-hand side, you'll see a button called School Safety. And under School Safety, there's a big button that's entitled uh, Concerns, Concerns Contacts. And if you go on there, you'll be able to see all of the contacts, whether it's elementary school, middle school, or high school. And that'll give you an idea of who should you turn to. As Lauren said, the first person you and your student should be talking to is the teacher. But after that, what's your next step? Look at that site, look at that page, and you can see, who's the next person to talk to if you need that extra communication. So that's the who. The when is also incredibly important. The timing of when we intervene can really make an impact on your student. I think, Lauren, you had mentioned something earlier about, waiting until the last minute is really not what our students need.
Mhm. Yeah, early and oft or early communication, waiting. I know there's sometimes there's tends to be a sense of fear that if you reach out too soon, or um I often hear about like a fear of retaliation, but what I find is, like, I want to partner with my families and I want to partner with my students, and I want them to give me the feedback earlier that they're struggling so that I can intervene with them and provide them with the support they need, either through access, or do I need them to direct them to, we have academic leadership tutoring here at Doherty. So are there other resources on campus that I can direct them to in order to get them the support they need? But if I'm reaching out, or if I'm getting that communication from a family, let's say, in November, it's going to be a lot more difficult for me to intervene and help that student, as opposed to them reaching out, let's say at the end of September, and going, hey, listen, I'm really struggling here. Can I meet with you during access, or when can I come for extra help? Um, there's more time and opportunity for me to intervene and make adjustments to my instruction, as opposed to, in mid-November, I've only got a finite period of time to make those adjustments. And sometimes it's a little too late because material builds upon itself as you move throughout the semester. So definitely reaching out first, early and often. And then the other piece I want to say is, you know, the often piece is, not every single week, but definitely if you need a progress check, that's the other piece about not letting go is, check back in, circle back around every couple of weeks or whatever to see how things are going, because again, you don't want something to kind of just fall off. And then you're scrambling at the end of the semester to figure out how you're going to support your student.
Yeah, there's a big difference between supporting your student early on and then looking back and trying to avert a disaster. And your student does not benefit because, if they're struggling, then they're facing anxiety, they're feeling stressed out, and We know for all of our students, that is just something that we do not want to put on them if we can avoid it. So now we've got the who, we've got the when. Now we look at the what. So with our students, this goes for our students and our parents. Every conversation we have, we want to remember that our teachers, our counselors, our administrators, they're all people. They're all people who have families, who are working, and they have responsibilities. So we want to be respectful. We really want to value their time. We want to make sure that when we speak to them, we are making the best use of their time as well as ours. We're conveying our messages in a concise manner, and we're looking to improve the outcome for our students. I think that a lot of times parents, and I say this, I was telling Lauren earlier that I have made every mistake possible in communications with my children's teachers, and that was a big reason for this presentation. We really have to make sure that the outcome is about our students. So this is kind of the roadmap for what our behavior as parents should look like. We want to make sure that we are communicating and not just trying to railroad our way through for our student, because at the end of the day, like I mentioned, this is a partnership. Our teachers, our admins, they know what's best for our students, but we have to communicate with them. Do you want to add anything onto that, Lauren, or?
Yeah, I would just say, it, I want to echo that it really truly is a partnership, and we truly do want what's best for your students. So every time I go into a meeting, I'm assuming positive intent. And oftentimes, even when it reaches the administrative level, I get there's a sense of anxiety, not only on behalf of the students or on behalf of the parents, because you've gotten into such a state, whether it's because of lack of communication or miscommunication even happens, that I we I always assume that people are coming into it with an open mind and with positive intent, because we want to see what's best for our students ultimately. And I want to say, most of the time we can come to a really successful and positive resolution, um, all the way around.
Absolutely. Um, so starting off, kind of going through each of those, good manners. And this is a part of being respectful. I have found, as by background, I'm an attorney, and I find that when I use polite language, when I am respectful, when I, use please and thank you, and I get a lot more results in that manner. And I think that goes pretty much without saying in every aspect of our lives. But sometimes we forget because we're so focused on our children. And I know, again, from my own experience, it's hard when you're advocating for yourself or for your child. But it really is important to remember, especially in those moments, that these little niceties really do make a difference. So when you go ahead and you're talking to a teacher or your student, the first thing you want to do is identify your concerns. You want to identify what the issue is. You want to be as clear as you can. And it's important to, when you're doing that, you want to frame it in a way that it shares your perspective. So I gave some examples. These are I messages, and these share how it looks from your perspective. I need help with, I don't understand. And when you share it in that way, it becomes non-combative. It helps the other person say, oh, okay, we had a lesson on this, and you didn't understand that. Let me help you with that. Versus, well, you're not teaching me the way I need to be taught, or you're not showing me this. I think that leads to a little bit more of a combative stance, and there's a breakdown in communications. Is that something you've experienced also, Lauren?
Yeah, it definitely puts the teacher on the defensive, or even an administrator on the defensive. And that's not something that we want, or anything we want to engage in. we, come into our classrooms with our best foot forward. We might not always have the best day because of things are going on in our lives, but we're definitely going in there trying to do our best for our students day in and day out. I also find that when parents approach me with questions, like, my student said this, can you explain a little bit more about whatnot? Versus like, you know, um, questioning things or probing a little bit further based on what your student shared with you, helps to kind of open up that dialogue, as opposed to my kid told me X and then period. What are you going to do about it? Period. That again, it's the defensive type of thing. I always try and watch, be more cognizant of my tone in email, because tone is very, comes across very differently in email. So um, I guess I tend to sound a little bit more positive or more chipper or whatever in an email, then maybe I might speak to somebody normally, because there are less contextual clues in an email, as
Right.
opposed to, body language or voice tone, or, tenor on a phone or a Zoom call or whatever. So I try to make sure that my tone is almost more positive, even if I am frustrated, because again, that some of that stuff gets lost in translation in text and email, as opposed to other manners of communication.
And that goes back to something you said earlier too about in-person communication being really important. I think emails are great to start a conversation or to have that appointment to let's have a phone call together. But I've gotten into email battles where one person says one thing and another says another, and you go back and forth, and an hour later you've spent God knows how much time arguing when a simple phone call could have resolved the issue within 2 minutes. So that I think it can never be underscored what you just said, and it can never be underscored enough that tone and in-person communication really does have a different effect on how we perceive things. And that goes right into active listening. So when we approach a teacher or an administrator, after we identify our concerns, we want to make sure that we listen. We want to make sure that we hear the other side. We want to make sure that we're open to what else is going on in this classroom. As Lauren said, your student may tell you something and then you might hear something completely different. I have two kids who were in the same exact class at one point, and one would come home and tell me how horrible the class is and, oh my God, that teacher knows nothing. And then the other child would come home and tell me what a great day he had, and he just loves that math teacher so much. So, you have to make sure that you're listening to all sides, that you're open to hearing different things, not just locked in to what you came in to say. And Lauren, jump in at any time if you have anything
For sure.
that you want to add. Um, Part of this also is acknowledging your own part and being honest with yourself and with your child. We know that as much as we want to, think that our children are perfect, they're children, they're growing, they're still changing. And part of our job is to acknowledge when they can do better. And same goes for ourselves, right? I know that there are times when I can do better, I can do things differently. And when we're speaking with a teacher, we have to realize that our children are not in a void. They're not learning on their own by themselves, locked away in the room. They are a part of our family. So, one of my children likes to study at the kitchen table, and she's perfectly fine doing that. Another child cannot do that. Like my other daughter cannot sit at the kitchen table. So I have to make sure I provide a quiet space for her. I have to remind her, no, you need to go into a different room. So making sure that we, are self-aware, I think is really important, and being willing to change. Again, it goes back to that partnership that Lauren and I had mentioned earlier of Let's make sure that we're all doing this together for the benefit of our student.
Some of the comments that our student panel had shared with us recently is especially their freshman and sophomore year, and making choosing the right courses for them as they matriculate through high school, is the idea that their study habits change drastically from middle school to high school, because the workload and how many courses they're taking, or the types of courses that they're taking, is going to change. So how they are preparing and how they are studying, what might have worked for them in eighth grade may not be working for them sophomore year when they're taking their first honors or weighted class, and there are going to be some growing pains or adjustments. So being able to reflect on that, but also reaching out to the teacher and saying, what strategies would you suggest? I know when I was in the classroom still, I would have my students write advice to next year's class, and I would share that with my current students, and they were able to take away some of those nuggets from previous years' kiddos of what worked well for in terms of studying and preparing for, my biology class. But again, that's going to shift and change, and know that that's okay if it shifts and change. You just have to acknowledge it and reach out for help. Counselors have some answers. Even administrators, dare I say it, have some answers on how to best prepare, or shift studying habits and stuff like that. So
That's a really great point that our children change so much between elementary to middle to high school, and especially when they're faced with the workload changes. So, and I love that you reference reaching out to counselors and to admins, because one of the things is that our counselors are here for us. I don't think I've ever had an interaction where with a school counselor where they've said, no, I'm too busy to talk to you, or sorry, that's not what I do. They've always been willing to help or to point me in the direction where I can find help. And I love the idea of reaching out and being proactive on that. I think that's a great suggestion. Okay. So, sometimes when we go into these meetings, or we think we know it all, and we want to present a solution. Um, it's hard when I think for anybody to hear, well, my child is doing X and I want this. There's a reason your child didn't get X in the first place. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about what would be the best solution for your child. And, maybe you start by throwing out ideas. Could we try this? How about this? What do you think about X? What do you think about Y? And if you notice in these three sentences, would it work if maybe we should try the word we? Because again, it's a partnership. It's not you, it's not your student, it's not the teacher. Nobody is working independently. It's all of us together. So if you're going to present a solution, present it in a way where you're taking into account all of the parties involved, and how all parties can work together to get to that solution that's going to push your child forward. And then finally, finding the right path forward. So I think I've said it several times that, our goal is, for our child to succeed, our student to succeed, and that we need to work together. And I think sometimes it gets hard when we're stuck into, I know, especially for kids. I've heard my own kids say, "Oh, that teacher just doesn't like me. That teacher just grades hard." And, sometimes again, teachers are human, but I don't think any teacher goes into teaching with the intention of disliking students. So, remember that the teacher is there to help your child. The teacher wants your child to succeed, and we just have to navigate that pathway to get there. Lauren, did you want to add anything on that?
yeah, I would say that the fear of, reaching out, or they grade hard, or they just don't like me. Um, they haven't had an opportunity to get to know that staff member yet or that teacher yet. Um, I would say, you know, I would share with my students, and I would even, have you share this with your students is, teachers make a living on the fact that you don't know the students don't know the answers. If I had a classroom full of kids who walked in my classroom all knowing the answers to biology, I'd be out of a job. And that's pretty sad because I really liked teaching biology, of course. But I would want them to reach out like, oh, I noticed I made a mistake on this. Can you tell me how I can better prepare for that type of question moving forward? And just giving them that like one nudge in the right direction just to open up that like one conversation starter or ask them about one particular question on an assignment. Once I feel like that dialogue starts to open between the student and the staff member and the teacher, then the student feels like, oh, that person is not as scary as they seem to have been, because that you've overcome the hurdle of initiating that, starting a conversation. So I would definitely say, and even just, I know many of our school sites have, access or tutorial. I know it's called different things, but that's such a great time to go in and see your teacher and even just to kind of get to know them on just like on a more intimate basis. Um, because oftentimes, those tutorial classes can be smaller because students are moving around. So, even if it's just, a quick hello, or I have a quick question on a homework question, taking advantage of that time with your teacher is really important. It makes it less scary. We're not as scary as we seem to be.
And that is something I think, in elementary school, I think it's easy to connect with your child's teacher because, just it's one teacher usually. And then in middle school, we start to move away a little bit as parents. And then in high school, we really see that, kids are kind of more on their own as they grow and they become more independent. But really encouraging your child to develop those relationships with their teachers, it really does benefit. I've seen that with my own children. The classes they enjoy are the classes where they feel most comfortable speaking to their teachers, and that I see the difference in their grades. So how do we communicate with teachers? So this is an example of a student email, and you can see it starts off with, the proper salutation, good evening, Dr. Seuss. And we start with that I sentence. I am having a hard time understanding. And then they ask for an action. I was hoping you could add me to your next period so I can get more help. And then again, thank you so much, Jake. Using those manners, um, this is an easy way, I think, for a teacher to understand. It's very specific on what does this student need? Where is this student looking for help? And, like Lauren said, teachers are there. They are more than happy to provide more instruction, more directed educational, whatever they can do to help our kids. So I think this is a great opening email, very to the point, lets the teacher know, and it identifies the student. Think about how many students teachers see, especially at the middle school and high school level. Um, it's hard just from a first name. So, I think this is a really good start.
Another tip I might just call out here is possibly including your students' period that they're in there with your teacher, because I've had multiple Jack Smiths or Brianna Smiths or whatever. So being able to identify what class period or what period they're coming from. And then just another suggestion, because I've had it happen to me, is teasing out what specifically they were having trouble on with regards to, is it note taking? I mean, today's lesson on cells. Are we talking about prokaryotic cells? Or are we talking about eukaryotic cells? Are we talking about the cell structures and functions? Being a little bit, and this is where you as a parent can step in. Oftentimes I would get an email or a student reach out and they're like, I need help on everything. Well, everything's a lot of things when you're talking about a 3-week unit on cells. So helping them narrow down that focus so I can make the best use not only of my time when I pull them into access as a teacher, but of their time as well. And then if I end up following back up with the student and the family, I can say, here's another resource you can go to get more help, outside of me seeing them at access. So being specific on what sometimes that can be challenging parents. I know it is because it's like, no, I just need help with everything. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure you know how to add, but doing derivatives is a little bit trickier. So we need to be specific on we need help with the derivatives, not the addition.
And that goes back to identifying the concerns. So that's a great tip. And you're right, there are so many kids. I've heard that. I just don't understand. I just don't get it. Like, what does that mean? So I think you're right about teasing it out of them is an important that's an important way that we as parents can help them before they even email their teacher. And I think I don't know if you had mentioned this, but somebody had mentioned to me that whenever you have your child email a teacher, have them copy you on it, so that, sometimes we say to our kids, email your teacher, and they forget or they don't do it, or something happens and they think they press send, but they didn't. This way, you know that they're on it, and that first step, that box is being checked. So here's another one. Um, the first one was on subject matter. This is on talking about a grade. A lot of times our students feel like they tried their hardest and they studied so well and everything looked great, and then it came back and it wasn't so great. So this one, you can see that again, it's an I sentence. And the student would like to meet with the teacher and review it. And I think that reviewing it is really the key step here, right, Lauren?
Absolutely. They're gonna want to get that feedback. There's different ways that they could possibly get feedback. I know some teachers review it depends, I guess, on the class and it depends on the teacher, but some teachers review the entire test once everything is graded and scored for everybody. So I know for me as a teacher, my goal is to get assessments back as soon as possible. But if I had extenuating circumstances like students out because of illness or out because of um, field trips or whatnot, and they still need to make it up, I wouldn't be able to hand those assessments back as readily, but I would be able to meet with a kiddo if they wanted more immediate feedback, even though I wasn't able to hand it back to them as soon as I would have liked because of, delays or whatnot. But definitely um, they want to get that feedback and yeah, I was saying a teacher could review it the next day or review it in class with everybody, or they sometimes just review common mistakes. So that's another way teachers can provide feedback. But again, if it's something that, they're struggling with, meeting with the teacher one-on-one is probably the best form to really understand where they're struggling. And if there are multiple assessments, looking kind of longitudinally, is it the same type of question that they're getting, that they're struggling on? Sometimes it's multiple choice questions, but it's a specific type of multiple choice question where you're going into a deeper depth of knowledge. Sometimes it's free response. I particularly did not enjoy writing very much, so my free responses were very brief. And my teachers wanted more out of me. So once I received that feedback, I understood that I needed to be a little bit more explanatory or verbose in my responses.
And we've all been there. And one of the other things I want to point out is that this email was obviously written at some point after the child received their grade back. Um, I know for our sports teams that players are not supposed to talk to their coaches about playing time directly on the field right after a game. They do ask for 24-hour cooling to off periods. And that helps kind of the emotion settle down a little bit. And I think the same is true when you get a bad grade. There's a lot of emotion that bubbles up, and There's anger, there's sadness, there's, God, I studied for so long and this is all I get. Taking a little bit of time between marching up to the teacher and saying, why did I get this grade, or what's wrong? Why didn't I do better? One, the teacher is not going to have time in that moment to go over the test properly with your student, but also taking a little bit of time to let your emotions settle down is going to let your student find the best path forward to help them succeed the next time around. So, I absolutely do value, teacher feedback, and I think this is a great thing to do, but I do think that a little bit of a cooling off period is really valuable.
And I just want to echo the cooling off period. And it's not because I don't, as a teacher, want to answer your students' questions, but keep in mind, I'm also being mindful of student privacy. And I don't want to have a grade discussion or a learning discussion about where your student is struggling or where their strengths are in front of 35 of their peers. That's not the appropriate time to do it. And they're probably either not in the best headspace, but I also don't want necessarily them to be doing the comparison game with their peers as well. And so it's not that I'm, as a teacher, shutting your kid down. That's not what I'm intending to do, but I'm also trying to be mindful of their privacy, and that this is not the time to have a discussion while you've got like 60 little ears listening in as well.
That is a great, great, great thing to point out. Um, so parents, let's say that your student does, even email and talks to the teacher and still not clear on what's going on. So now you're stepping in. So again, using those manners, the I statements and what it looks like from your perspective. And, can you help us? Can you help us get some more clarification? And, like Lauren said, asking questions is a great way to invite a teacher to discuss something, to be more open about what your child can do, or, what needs to happen to see an improvement in some way. Anything on this one, Lauren, or are you good?
Nope, I think you nailed it.
And then let's say you've gone through, your student met with the teacher, you met with the teacher, you've gone through the process of meeting with a counselor, and now you're heading on up to an administrator or an assistant principal, or a principal, depending on what level of schooling your child is in. Again, you want to be concise. You want to provide the information. You want to make it non-combative. Remember that while you and your student's teacher may have a disagreement, your objective is the same: for your student to succeed. So, taking that adversarial relationship out of the picture is really helpful. And, looking forward to the next level of saying, hey, what can we do to resolve this issue while still moving forward? So, and then last, I always encourage thank you emails. And this is whether it was an in-person just between your student and the teacher, or whether it was emails. And I like them because, one, it shows the person that you appreciated the time they took to talk to you. And I think appreciation goes a long way. But I also like it because it lets me reiterate what the conversation was about. It lets me clarify what my role as as a parent, what my role is. If I'm the student, it lets me clarify what the student should be doing, and then, kind of map out what the teacher said he or she may be doing. So that way we're all on the same page. And again, it helps all of us move forward without any confusion or any lingering questions, and kind of put the issue to bed, I think. Lauren?
I am very much encouragement of a follow-up email. I try to do them as often as possible for that exact same point. Just, appreciation, but also following up on next steps. And if we need to circle back around on a conversation, we thought we were going to get something in, or we thought we were going to be able to follow up with academic leadership. And I mean, things happen. I mean, circumstances, life happens, and being able to go back and say, okay, I wasn't able to do this. Is there another strategy I can try? Really helps. Because if a student is struggling over, multiple weeks type of thing, and you've tried this strategy and it hasn't worked, and then you've tried another strategy and it hasn't worked, then we know that we're going to have to, as a team together, kind of up the ante and kind of look at, maybe out of the box solutions on that. But having that paper trail and knowing like what strategies you've tried is really helpful in informing next steps, especially if like, you know, other circumstances have arisen. Students are hospitalized, and we know that they're not really awake in the morning due to treatment or whatever. Okay, so we're going to look at other options, and we're going to maybe shift a schedule and look at more of, I want to say, extreme options, because we've tried all these other ones and we have that paper trail to help back us up on that.
No, that's a great point. It is like that paper trail, I think, is helpful for all of us. You know, um, it just lets us go over our actions and remember, reminds us to be accountable for what we have said that we will do. And it lets us, talk to others and say, hey, this is where we were. What can we do moving forward? So all right, last, just a few helpful tips. This is kind of what we've been going over all evening. I don't know, Lauren, if you have anything other than these. These are just sort of, little things I've gathered. Um, and it seems fairly simple, but then I think putting these into practice, a lot of times we don't always do it, and we should. And I say that because I'm sitting here giving you all this presentation, and like I said, I've gone through all these mistakes. I've done all of these, and even now I still have to remind myself, go through the steps, go through the process, take the cooling off time, ask for help, ask for, explanations and how you can do better versus, well, I deserve an A and that's all there is to it.
I think, I think I statements are definitely key here, but the other piece that I also want to kind of shed a light on or bring into perspectives is, we're talking about, when you're reaching out, we're having a dialogue, whether it's with a teacher, a counselor, an administrator. We're having a dialogue with you about your student. And I've at least found within administration that oftentimes I get, well, everybody in my child's class is feeling this way, or everybody in my child's class, everybody tanked that test, or everybody who has this AP basket weaving teacher, the entire class average is a C minus. And at that point in time, it's very, when you talk about putting people on the defensive, it's, I can't really refute that because it's rumor, and I want to have a dialogue on how best to support your student. And I can't necessarily say what's going to work with every kiddo, because each kiddo is different. And, their circumstances are different, or whether or not they're a student with special needs and have specific accommodations that we have to, work on with them. So I would say definitely stick to your student and what we can do to support them, and having that dialogue versus kind of lumping them in, because they are an individual and their circumstances are definitely different, and their preferences, what they're interested in and what they're not interested in, is different. There are people who absolutely love math, and that's their preferred activity, and that's the first thing that they're going to get out of their backpack when they come home to do their homework. But if we're talking about another kiddo who's in that same math class, that might be their least preferred subject, and they'd rather get out their English homework first. Again, those two students are very, very different in how we're going to support them moving forward. So I would say, keep, just when you reach out, that whole lumping your kids in with everybody does again, can put people on the defensive, but we really want to focus on your student because that's how we're going to be best to move forward. We can't lump them in with everybody because they're not everybody, they're them.
And I want to reiterate too that that is one of my I'm on a lot of the different WhatsApp groups. I think I'm on Windermere, Cal High, and Doherty just because I've got kids in different schools. And I see the conversations. I see the, well, this teacher grades really hard and everybody failed that test, or what did your child get? What did you do? Um, but I've said this before and I'll say it again. When it comes to your child, all those people on those WhatsApp groups, they actually can't do anything. It's you, your child, and your child's educators. Those are the people who really make a difference to your child's well-being and their education. So, I love social media and I think it's fantastic in so many ways. But when my child needs help, I don't like to go to social media. I like to go to the people that can actually make an impact on what my child is doing in school. So I just want to repeat again, go to your counselors, go to your teachers, go to your admins. They're the ones who really are there to they're invested in your specific child, like Lauren said. So I think that is the end of our presentation. I am going to, let me see if I can show you all. So this is if you go to srvusd.net, click out of there. And if you go to, I believe, school safety, and then concerns and contact. And then down here is that little blurb that we showed you all about the different steps. And if you continue down, whether your child's in elementary, middle school, high school, or at Venture or Del Amigo, you can click on there. Now just click on elementary school. And here's your first step. Step 1 and step 2, teacher staff member. You find your school, here's your principal. You really should be talking to your teacher, then your principal. If you are, let's say, in high school where it's a little bit more complicated, let's start with Cal High. Step 1 and 2 is the teacher, then your counselor, then your assistant principal, then we get over to your principal, and then you've got district site supervisors. And these are our secondary education district level administrators who are available to resolve issues with you. So if you ever find yourself in a position where you do need to reach out to somebody and you're not sure where to go, this 100% under school safety is a great little handy little site to look at. So, Lauren, do you have time for questions by any chance?
I'm happy to answer questions. I want to just add one last thing is most issues, I would say most issues can be resolved at the step number 2 level, especially if you're reaching out early or in advance when something is popping up, because again, when it lingers on down the road and we're in kind of more crisis mode as opposed to intervening early, most issues can get resolved at step number 2 pretty effectively. The other thing is ask your students, and you can even reach out to your student's teacher or have your student reach out to their teacher of how they best communicate. Most of the time you're going to find it is through Schoology, but I've also seen families or teachers use agenda PowerPoints or slides for the week's agenda with links in it. I've seen newsletters that they send out to their students and families. So there is a method. So if you want to know what that specific method of communication that your teacher or their teachers use on a regular basis to communicate assignments, deadlines, extra help sessions, access sessions, reach out and ask. Like I said, most of the time it will likely be on Schoology, but there are other forums or other platforms that teachers might reach out via as well. And then the method, I think I touched upon this with you when we spoke a little bit earlier, is the amount of communication varies. depending on whether or not your student is a freshman compared to when they are a senior. And also what level of course they may be taking, right? Developmentally wise, a freshman's going to need possibly more nudging and more points of contact as opposed to a senior who's, preparing to go off to college and has submitted all their college applications and whatnot. And that type of, or the amount of communication between the student and the teacher might look different at that older level compared to that younger level. But even in terms of like students who advance too, you might have a student who's a sophomore who's sitting in their first weighted class, or even an AP class, which is, by all intents and purposes, a college level course, and that method of communication needs to be adjusted. So just reach out and say like, hey, where can I get the most up-to-date information, or how frequently can I connect with you? Because developmentally, what students need in terms of communication is going to shift between their freshman year and their senior year as well.
Absolutely. Big changes in those times. So I think that that is going to be it for us tonight. I'm going to stop sharing real quick. And I just want to thank all of you for joining us tonight and for being here. And Principal Faulkner, I just want to thank you for spending your Wednesday night with us. I know that this time of night is very precious for all of our parents and teachers. And so I appreciate you taking the time to be here with us. So,
Absolutely.
all right. And with that, we will conclude our program. Thank you all so much for being with us tonight.